Okay, so this is I Read Old Magazines. We're back just to read a quick article that I said I'd leave as an addendum to this series. Um, it's from Unity Publishing. Not really sure about them. I didn't look into their history real deeply, but there's an article called Maria Horvat, the Nice Girl of Integrism. And it's by Gerard Norskov. And Maria Horvat is one of these extremely fascist, Dark Ages type people that, meanwhile, is supporting and supports uh, CIA objectives. I mean, she supported the Obama administration's CIA and their actions against Ukraine or Russia by serving Ukrainian independence, where you have homosexual Nazis parading half naked down the street and death squads of Saboda and things like this, and where you actually have John McCain up on stage with during a Nazi rally. Um, so we're going to go into Maria Horvat, and this article kind of also describes how this network ties together, at least the tradition, family, and property aspect. Okay, so Maria Horvat, the Nice Girl of Integrism, by Gerard Norskov. Watching a Catholic community auto-destruct is wrenching. The Society for Tradition, Family, and Property of TFP is eating Kansas City alive. It is a scenario played out all over the world. TFP is an all-male secret society promoting a higher calling than the priesthood, the warrior monk. TFP is a cold-blooded vocation killer. Not one priest is a conservative formation of young men anywhere in its international ranks since its founding in the early 60s. So they produced no priests. None. One of TFP's slickest screw tapes has been a woman, Marian Horvat. Horvat, president of TFP's Californian offshoot Tradition in Action, distinguished herself as one of 4 collaborating signatories to We Resist You to the Face, directed at Pope John Paul II, Manifesto for Catholic Schism. I don't think that's what they dubbed it. We Resist You to Your Face is what it's called. Before that, Horvat's duties were in the heartland and more along the line of We Stab You in the Back with the quiet destruction of the faithful. She's a nice girl, well-spoken and polite, and she gave TFP and their ideas on her into nice families. The Catholic scholars at her alma mater, KU, saw through the Horvat family obsession with TFP and rejected their overtures to infiltrate the Integrated Humanities Program, a veritable incubator for clerics and other religious. Others have not been so discerning. Pious boys exploring their calling have been hardened into caustic snobs who are taught by TFP recruiters to despise their parents as the fountain of my revolution. The simplest mysteries of Judeo-Christianity is election. Okay. First, my editorial, there's no such thing as Judeo-Christianity. You have to make that distinction, and it's not to go into an anti-Semitic tirade, it's simply to say, no, there's a line in the sand drawn by um, Christ and Paul. Going on, St. Paul. Yet it is almost unfathomable that the Most High chooses to grace souls and peoples for reasons unknown to man. The antithesis of an election, indeed a tenet of Babylonian mystery religions, as is secrecy, is elitism. That is correct. This is a man eating himself above other men, exalting himself above other men. We are warned, the Lord reviled the people's desire for a king to rule over them, and told of their inevitable exploitation. Hindu elitism is writ in squalor of a rigid caste system. The unholy marriage of elitism and Catholicism was fabricated in TFP founder Polino's, uh, Plinio, Polino's book, The Nobility and Traditional Elites. It was offered for sale after Latin Mass approval by the KCMO bishop. $50 a book was the penance exacted for presuming this to be a noble elite Catholic. But the young salesmen were friends of Maria Horvath, glowingly praised in the tome, and she was a smart KU teaching assistant who hammered a journalism degree into a doctorate in a medieval history. Few read this lavishly illustrated book, consigning it to the coffee table. In Nobility, the race and blood cults condemned by Pius XII are resurrected in his own words, spin-doctored to TFP's agenda. Pius XII's flattering pleas to the nobility of Italy for funds to feed the starving during World War II are transformed into support for TFP's militant monarchists. Published 2 years before Polino's death, Maria Horvath garnered high honors from the author for his assistance. That's saying a lot. Plinio Corre de Oliveira was a self-styled demigod, described reflexively in a TFP litany to his mother, Donna Lucilia, as the axiological principle of, or first cause, of divinity. That's the secret side of TFP. In Plinio's book, the elite are defined as blue bloods and as professors like himself and Maria. It is a predatory philosophy of non serviam, like the fiction Spaceman's Cookbook How to Serve Man. Horvath's brother adds information for the American audience. The elite of America were the Southern slaveholder in general, and genetic marvels like Robert E. Lee in specific. Here is how the race and blood cult, American style. Priests do not fit into the TFP schema. They serve, they are poor, they do not rule countries. The colorful scroll centerfold in Nobility proclaims the preferential option for the nobility. John Paul II's preferential option for the poor is directly contradicted. That's refreshing. There can be no question whose side they are on. The schismatic heraldry of "We resist you to the face" was just a flourish on a split with the servant of servants started years before. TFP disdains the priesthood, predicting its obsolescence. No priests, no Eucharist. Wormwood, be advised. Horvath's crocodile tears for lost vocations as inspiring "We resist you to the face" are hypocritical. Styling herself a latter-day Joan of Arc, Horvath is free agent serving only demigod Plinio and the 10 kings of the Antichrist, with no regard for prelates unless they are useful as camouflage for TFP or tradition or the America needs Fatima cash cow. Radical materialism is the name of the game and another hallmark of Babylonian mystery religions. That's the philosophical basis for communism. So it is no surprise that KU's longtime campus communists converted to Horvath's brand of Catholicism. I don't know who that is. One gets all the exploitation without any guilt. Poor are solicited by mail for $1 a day, and the wealthy get quietly approached for donations at homes, large sums of money, and farms, not to mention the entrustment of children. Horvath guided the formation of young women in their home, school, sodality, and the children of traditional Catholics and other educational venues. Marian Horvath is an apt pupil of TFP's techniques and ingratiates herself to the wealthy, well-educated, and powerful only. Peasants are the enemy, and perhaps too reminiscent of her blue-collar background. Catholic scholars cottoned to her, and she sailed her pirate ship under their colors whenever possible. Alice von Hildebrand was shamefully used in discussions aired on EWTN. She slipped over one of the elderly philosophers by dropping Plinio's name into the mix. EWTN got wind of it and axed the Femininity and Feminism series, but the Virago is far from feminine. Horvath's favorite ploy for testing the mettle of proteges at family compound was to invite them over and release their snapping, snarling German shepherds. Some left, some signed on to continue undermining the Catholic community in her stead. Horvath came razor close to imposing TFP school on Kansas City residents under the banner of conservative Catholic education. The moneyed Texas woman Horvath talked into bankrolling the venture, got wind of her unseemly contradictions and connections, and mercifully withdrew. Watch for this coiling snake of Babylon cast, and beg the Blessed Virgin Mary to have bare feet ready to crush its head. Postcards may be found in the back of the church from America Needs Fatima. One response, it is virtually impossible to free from TFP's stunning direct mail solicitation. And the boys from Brazil are very appealing as they march like medieval militants in their red capes, inserting themselves at the head of pro-life rallies or setting up bookstalls at Catholic conferences, usually without permission. They are spoiling for a fight, and it is not with the forces of evil for which they claim they need lots of cash. It is with the magisterium, and that they are already condemned by Brazilian Bishops' Conference, their home country. It is with Peter, as we resist you to the face, obsequiously declares. It is with God, as blithely breaking the first commandment to honor no false gods. That's Plinio, who did not arise from the dead, as he prophesied of himself, and do watch out for nice girls and pearls. So a little bit of a snarky and a very editorial type piece going on. Integrists showing their hand. Here's a quote. In our view, a possible future declaration of seda vacantism or seda vacante, the period of time when the apostolic see is empty as a consequence of heresy of the Pope, would take place automatically when the Church would become aware of the gravity of present-day errors and who is responsible for them. And that's part of the We Resist the Pope to His Face, Volume 3 or Version 3 of this manifesto. So there we have it. Despite all the spin, tuckered away neatly at the very end of their We Resist You manifesto, though it is the very foundation of the errors and audacity, it will, according to Michael Matt, Mariez, Horvat, and Venori, only take the true ideal church to become aware of these integrists predict. Of what these integrists predict. It's a clunky article. That the Pope is a heretic, in substantial rupture with tradition in several dogmatic areas, and then retroactive seda vacantism. The popes they disagree with will all be deposed. It's not even spelled right. The same seda vacantism to which the signers of the We Resist the Pope to His Face manifesto are clearly implicitly committed now. Though they tried in the past to play it coy through doublespeak and obfuscation when possible. Of course, they deny it when convenient, but most people are not stupid. This is how these deluded souls can urge the public to follow them and officially suspend obedience, till the Pope, since John 23rd, charged them with heresies and ruptured with tradition, and declare a sustained public resistance, since they simply do not believe that the Council or present Holy Father has the authority to bind them. They have created an alternative parody church, Michael Matt, Attila Gomarias, who lead them. They alone will measure the truth. It is tragic, and they were warned by many. I myself warned Michael Matt that he was losing control and headed towards the cliff in vain. Their implicit seda vacantism is the very foundation of their belligerence and their call for all traditionalists to unite under such a reckless manner. They alone will be the arbiters of what is and what is not Catholic, not the living teaching magisterium. Such tragically is the hubris of schism. These and their defenders, Christopher Tom Woods, a Lutheran, just several years ago, now instructing the Pope on Catholicism. Jonathan Tuttle, John Paul VI is an eschatological Antichrist parrot. So that's John Parrott. And others are all of one essential mind. To defend and appear with them is to join them, to propagate their errors and midwife schism. As the extreme trad conferences draw fewer and fewer people, they are now combining efforts. TFPers, Grunerite Fatima cash cowites, rigorous Feeneites, seda vacantists, etc. Then there is independent evangelist Gary Metactics, who speaks and makes a living off their conferences and has long supported their efforts and views. Map this man's preaching itinerary, past and present, if you want to see sustained integrist confusion up close. At this writing, he shared a conference with reportedly suspended in Vegas priest Father Nicholas Gruner and Gruner's sidekick Father Paul Kramer, another roaming independent priest. And my personal editorial is I like Father Paul Kramer, but there is a problem here. At the most rigorous and independent Feeneyite group in the world, in Richmond, New Hampshire, not all disciples of Father Feeney are extremists. We had hoped this group was trying to regularize its position with the Church, but this conference was reportedly poised to attack the Holy Father and Cardinal Ratzinger on third secret, as they have done in their literature. The Enema Tactics reportedly moved on to speak at the Remnant Forum with the very signers of the Schismatic Manifesto, which concerns us here. This man would truly appear to be the evangelist, called and sent by whom? Not by the Church, the counter-magisterium. Like neo-modernists, all these men thrive on opposition to the Holy Father. So this is kind of I think this is written during Pope Francis. So, I mean, there's problems on both sides. So, going on. Yeah, how can Tactics have glowing, surreal testimonies of support at his website from the likes of the late Cardinal O'Connor, Father Kenneth Baker, Dr. Ralph McErney, and others? Certainly these men would utterly reject Gary Matactic's association and theology today. Surely these testimonies, and not just Cardinal O'Connor's, must have been taken out of the mothballs, written before he and his friends had reached the cliffs of schism. At any rate, we might ask Mr. Matactics if we can assume he acknowledges the law of non-contradiction with St. Thomas Aquinas, just whose theology he subscribes to. Is it Michael Matz, Christopher Rivera's, Father Gruner, rigorous Feeneyite Brother Francis, or Father Baker's, Dr. McErney's, and Cardinal O'Connor's? For these theologies are contradictory in the extreme, and indeed represent the abyss which divides grave errors, material schism from orthodoxy. The Tactics at this writing was recently asking for $31,000 at his website at this writing before it's too late. But in their ad hominem attacks, in their insults and mockery, integrism is a joyless, bitter affair. We hear the death rattle of the call, an implicit sedevacantism which can only be retracted, not spun, as Ferreira had tried to in vain to do through convoluted argument, obfuscation, and smear in his distempered responses in the Remnant, the publication of the Mattites. Love of endless polemics among those who have fallen prey to this counter-magisterium mentality manifests a deep spiritual and existential vacuum, the tragic inner fruit of setting oneself against the visible Church of Jesus Christ and its divine always and whatsoever. Only repentance can restore the graces lost in communion. Otherwise, they are untrained wannabe theologians of a parody of church and absurdity and spectacle. Steadfastness in error is not a virtue but a vice, rooted in disastrous pride which prefers self, one's own private interpretations to the Church. It is time for the manifesto signers and the defenders to show the courage to change and return to humble obedience, divinely appointed and living magisterium, and to publicly retract, not endlessly spin, their public and precise declarations. These men show why the Church needs the patron office and teaching magisterium, how great the wisdom of God to give us these offices and to save us from the labyrinth of private judgment. And finally, the last subheading of this article, the heretics of evasion, Christopher Ferreira. The implicit sedevacantist assumption is clear. To predict the Pope will be deposed for heresy and then add, but we are not sedevacantists, or that sedevacantism does not follow from the statement is simply sophistry, not to mention illogical. The whole structure and ground of their campaign of public resistance to the teaching magisterium and the Catholic suspending obedience towards its foundation on this conviction and prediction. The matter is grave. A canon law study to be published next year concludes that the authors are indeed in schism, in addition to the schismatic withdrawing obedience to the magisterium in dogmatic areas indicates the signers showed clear malice by going public and thus have, quote, incurred the latae sententia excommunication provided for schism under Canon 1364, Section 1, and thus the legitimate ecclesiastical authority would have sufficient moral certitude of imputability by reason of malice to declare sentence against the authors of this declaration. Moreover, as one reputable Catholic wrote, let's praise this one. In our view, a possible future declaration of Sede Vacante would take place automatically when the Church would become aware of the gravity of the present-day errors and who is responsible for them. The writers of We Resist You are talking like liberals. Who is the Church? Not the hierarchy, because the hierarchy is in cahoots with the Pope. By the Church, we must understand we the people. This is liberal speak. When enough of us become aware of the gravity of the situation, these writers, when a critical mass has been reached, an incipient majority perhaps, or at least a sufficient intensive minority, then automatically there will be a declaration of no popery. Who will make this declaration? Representatives of the people, of course, since the hierarchy will be morally and intellectually incapable of speaking up. And who are these representatives? Could they be those who write for a 7,000 circulation newsprint publication coming out of a small town in the northern wilds? Decision is clearly called for. Along other lines, Father Gruner covering Mooney lingo tracks. And this is interesting. This is Sun Myung Moon's connection to traditional Catholicism, the cult that operated the Washington Times, had all sorts of intelligence connections. Father Nicholas Gruner, reported suspended in Vegas priest, who also puts out a magazine entitled Fatima Crusader, recently began to expunge the name of Archbishop Emmanuel Malingo from his online editions of the magazine after TCR and others showed their collaboration. Malingo, who, like the author of Gone with the Wind at the Vatican, has long showed fevered imagination in his obsessions with healings and devils, was courted by Gruner and other integrists because he openly attacked the Vatican and even widely accused the Vatican of nothing less than Satanism, which inflamed the Grunerites. Gruner's Fatima Crusader, under Fatima News, published the following report citing Malingo as a major source. Quote, in recent weeks, a firestorm has been raging in Italy. The controversy revolves around statements Archbishop Emmanuel Malingo, who has made formal, jeez, help me, made formal allegations that satanic activity is taking place inside the Vatican. When questioned by the Italian press about the allegations, he said that he stood by them. The Archbishop chose the Fatima 2000 International Congress on World Peace, held in Rome in November 1996, hosted by Fatima Crusader magazine, as a platform to make the first allegations public. The Fatima 2000 Congress was sponsored by publisher Father Nicholas Gruner, who has spent the past 18 years attempting to persuade the Vatican to consecrate Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, as she requested in the apparitions to 3 shepherd children at Fatima, Portugal in 1917. Father Gruner has sought disclosure of the third secret, which has been kept under lock and key in the Vatican since it was delivered there in 1957 and read by Pope John XXIII in private. Archbishop Malingo, who works inside the Vatican as the special delegate to the Pontifical Council for the pastoral care of immigrants and itinerants, is uniquely qualified to speak on the issue of Satanism. Besides his responsibilities in the Vatican, the Archbishop is a world-renowned veteran exorcist. These allegations by Malingo are particularly interesting to informed Catholics because these statements that the Archbishop is making are very similar to the recent book written by a well-respected Catholic writer and my editorial benign birth agent, Dr. Malachi Martin. In conclusion, it appears obvious that Satanism is now and has been existing inside the walls of the Vatican itself. Through the courageous and reputable testimony of Archbishop Malingo and Dr. Malachi Martin, this deeply buried Vatican secret is surfacing at long last. The courageous Archbishop Malingo, however, aged 71, became a Mooney, that is, a member of the Unification Church of Reverend Moon. He also took a wife. When TCR linked the above report, Gruner's found out and scrambled to take it down. Gruner also had published a roster of integrist speakers, which we linked to such as the following, where Malingo was originally named before being expunged. Of course, quote, of course, the lecture roster contains some of the world's finest speakers on Fatima and its profound importance. Speakers including Father Nicholas Gruner, Father Paul Kramer, Christopher Ferreira Esquire, Cornelia Ferreira, Joseph Kung from the Cardinal Kung Foundation, Jerry Matakis, Biblical Foundations, Michael Matt, the Revenant, Christopher Story, Soviet analyst, and John Venari from Catholic Family News, who also chaired the conference. Malingo was then listed here, but removed after the collaboration was made, even more when TCR featured it from Gruner's own site. Previously published at Gruner's site, Fatima 2000, A Grand Event, the references and stories can still be found in Gruner's literature. Gruner is also reported to own some share in Catholic Family News, which joined the Mattite group, and Attila Guimaraes in publishing and promoting a manifesto last year called We Rebuke the Pope to His Face, urging disobedience to popes of Vatican II in all areas which they declare heretical. Clearly, this latest attempt to cover his tracks would seem to show that Father Gruner and the notorious Integrist crowd, which often hits the speakers' circuits together like self-appointed Methodist writers, bashing the Vatican whenever they can, who thought Malingo was a big catch for extreme traditionalists, will quote and promote most any source, no matter how wild, so long as Gruner is made to look like a savior of the Church, and the Vatican is made to look like, well, devils by the light of a slippery Mooney. All right, well, that was fun. All right, I think that's it. Article basically just kind of delves into the whole tradition, family, and property thing, and people around Father Gruner. And I like some of these people, but at the same time, it begs the question: what, you know, the Catholic Church, the papacy. Why are you hiding the fact that your seat vacant this thing behind layers and layers and layers of obfuscation? Especially when you write something that says we resist the Pope to his face. Now, that being said, the present day Pope is still bound by past popes, so you can do that with using such revolutionary type language is indicative of maybe some confused intents and confused objectives. But I did not know about Plinio, uh, who was Maria Horvat's mentor. So that was an interesting thing to find out. Other than that, I don't have anything left. Post the article link in the description, and God bless.